Okay, Kat Bradley, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, I'm really stoked to be on. Thank you, Dylan.
Yeah, and you recently made big news with a very exciting announcement, signing with a new sponsor, Brooks Running, after several
Woohoo!
years. Yeah, several years as a Solomon athlete. And it sounds like it's a fantastic new chapter of your career. And I can't wait to talk all about that in detail. But before we get to it, there's so much more that I want to learn about you and so much more that I want to talk about. And starting sort of with your childhood, and for what I understand, you grew up in Hawaii, and I just wonder sort of what that's like, and maybe how that's sort of shaped you as a person.
Man, I mean, there's like so much depth to that question.
Yeah.
You know, so I grew up in Hawaii. My dad is fifth generation has lived there.
Really?
And my mom moved from she actually my mom, super unique person, moved to Hawaii as a professional model, met my dad, had all of us, and my mom, being from New England, like classic New England, and my dad being from Hawaii, obviously, the marriage didn't work out. My parents were split, but having these two parallels from, like, I grew up in Hawaii. First, I'm the only haole in my school, or
Okay.
on the island, so it's very, there's definitely a culture there of, and I told, and this is something that, I was really conflicted with as a kid, and
Hmm.
had a really hard time with, but I definitely have grown to understand and reflect on, how I would feel. But being a haole, or a Caucasian living there,
Yeah.
especially in the public school system, it's hard.
Right.
It's hard, and people don't like you. And but then going to New England, where it just culturally it's so different. My mom and her whole family's there, and just having those two totally uh, polar opposite cultural experiences, totally shaped me.
Yeah.
And then also just growing up always being outside. Like, I joke, I thought my problem was with winter for so long, but I think it's with the gear. I think I just, like, growing up, I was just,
Uh,
I never I didn't have to wear shoes till high school. And
really.
seriously, I was barefoot until high school. And
So
and
were you on the Big Island, or where was your
so
home?
I was on Oahu until sixth grade, and then we moved to the Big Island. So I went from, like, Kaimuki, which is, in the city, in Honolulu, which is like a big city, and then I moved to the country, Honoka'a area, and went to Honoka'a in
Yeah.
high school, and it was so cool. And Honoka'a, if anyone knows the area, it's uh, I grew up in Honoka'a, Waimea area, and it's just as country as it gets. And one of the biggest ranches in the country is there, called
Yeah.
Parker Ranch, and it's super spiritual there too. And and I definitely, and my no one in my family is outdoorsy. And growing up there, and growing up, my peers and their families were all connected to I'd
Hmm.
go to a friend's house, and um we'd go, like, spearfishing, or we'd go, like, you know do we'd go, and, like, and it sounds crazy, but we'd sit in the creek, and like, my friend's parents would bless us all.
Wow.
It's something like called the climb, and, like, that's what we all did on weekends. And it
It's
is
just like
super
this
interesting.
the spirit of the island sort of dictates, or sort of like penetrates every bit of life. And I read a book last year called Barbarian Days, which I'm sure you've heard of. It's an
Hmm.
amazing book all about surf life and surf culture, and much of it
Hmm.
revolves around the main character being a Caucasian person growing up in Hawaii. And it is seems to be sort of like a critical part of his development as a person, and understanding his role within the society there, and how the local people sort of felt about him and his ancestors sort of coming to their land. And he also talks very
Mhm.
eloquently about, sort of almost the religious experience of surfing and of being on the island. Do you
And it
identify with
is
that? Yeah.
absolutely and also it's just it it is the ocean and the land. It is religion there. And and especially coming from a haole, it is something that I grew up surfing. I grew up
Yeah.
like probably some of my first experiences in like a competitive culture were doing menehune competitions on surfing. And you know if you go into an area before a surf comp, and it's a local area, and people, and like I talked pigeon when I was a kid, just
Yeah.
just it's part of the culture. But so they knew I was called um an island haole, so meaning I was a haole still, but I was obviously from
But you were
Hawaii.
from Hawaii. Okay.
And but it is a way to connect with people. And if you just and some me and my sister, and my sister is still in Hawaii and is dating someone right now from
Yeah.
this super Hawaiian family. And this is something that we talk about a lot, is just like you just got to respect, that no matter if and it's something that, my family, we all kind of disagree on, and it's conflict. My brothers are like, I don't understand. This is our home. We grew up here. How
Yeah.
is this not ours? But if you just have to go into every experience and every new place, especially just as a haole and as someone who, it's easy to feel like you don't belong. But if you
Hmm.
go in and respect, you know, respect that you are a visitor, then you will be maybe not accepted, but respected too.
Yeah.
And it is. And like again, ocean, that's something that we can all share together, as long as we're respectful. Like, I'm not going to drop in on your line. Tell me when I can take this wave. And and that's just the way it
Wow.
goes.
Well, what a beautiful way to start. That's so cool. And I mean, obviously, like the parallel to trail and ultra running is obvious, right? Like there is that sort of like mutual respect and admiration that, we kind of all have for one another within the sport as well. And, I think what makes it special and what keeps people so connected to the community and so almost religiously committed to the practice is because
Hmm.
we have this feeling of like deep respect for one another, and approach each race and each interaction usually,
Hmm. And not only
generally speaking.
absolutely, and not only the interactions, but the places that we're running in. And I think that's
uh
something super unique to this sport. Cycling, you don't really see that. It's like surfing and trail running and rock climbing are the sports that I have seen and
so cool.
participated in, that that not only do we have a deep respect for each other, but
Yeah.
also for the places that we're recreating in.
Wow.
And I think that's really cool. And I think that's why I was so attracted to trail running.
Yeah. So as a Howley growing up there, I didn't expect we would sort of talk about this, but does it make you feel like a sense of kinship, or do you identify with people who feel like they don't belong, or do you go out of your way to sort of like maybe connect with people, or do you see yourself in people here on the mainland in the US who sort of are marginalized or feel like they don't belong?
I never want to compare myself to someone in the US who feels marginalized, because that's something that I've learned. I think living on the mainland, I've been here about, over 10 years, and
Yeah.
just being it's on a much bigger scale.
Hmm.
Um, where my experiences in Hawaii were very acute. And then I got to come to the mainland, and almost I felt like almost escaped from it. And I think for a long time I was resistant to going back to Hawaii, because I was bullied. Like, tampons were tied to my locker by local
Yeah.
girls, like used tampons. It was brutal. it was
Yeah.
it was really brutal. But in a lot of ways too, um maybe I just that I didn't respect it as much as a kid. And maybe coming here, I did escape it, and I felt, you know, almost free here. And like I didn't have like an identity that was attached to being Howley
Yeah.
on the mainland, which is like something that I was like so ashamed, and I did everything to
Huh.
hide it too, which
Mm.
like my mom would come to track meets, and classic New England, also professional model, so like beautiful, stands out like a sore thumb already.
Yeah.
And I would just try and hide, like want to hide. She'd
Yeah.
come to my track meets, and I would beg her not to.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just so interesting.
Yeah.
And it's something like, especially in the last few years, I've really thought a lot about, because I didn't want to go back to Hawaii, and it's a part of myself that I tried to like shove down, even though I
Yeah.
love growing up there. I loved, and I feel so lucky to have had those experiences. But in a way, who I was became a part of my identity in a way that I didn't want to. And so I guess I never want to say I do relate, because again, I escaped here, as
Sure.
you know.
Sure. Yeah,
Um
and of
eh,
course I don't want to, draw comparisons to, other
totally.
people who truly are marginalized, but I think we can
Mhm.
all kind of look back at moments in our lives where, we feel left out or ostracized, or like we don't belong. And,
Mhm.
I think that is something that, all young people go to one degree or another. And so, I think your experience is really unique, and I just think it's an interesting thing to explore. And I don't know
Mhm.
if you listen to the show much, but one of the things I just really love to do is to really sort of get a 360 understanding of the people that I talk to, and sort of like learn
Yeah.
what makes them tick, and maybe draw some themes throughout your life that obviously have led to enormous success. But oftentimes big success, big achievement is born from things in our lives that weren't as pleasant to experience.
Mhm.
And so maybe that was one of the things for you. So let's sort of like fast forward a little bit. I'm curious, you said you sort of got into competition through surfing. When did you start to sort of explore running or endurance sport? When did you sort of discover that talent that you had?
Yeah, so I mean, I'd always been just like kind of an adventurer. And I did some running here and there just because I liked, the way it felt. But not I wasn't like, if you'd ask me if I liked running, I'd be like, no, I hate running. But I did do, looking back, I did do it, but like, in terms of play. But I actually got into running because I was getting in trouble at school for truancy, and just not showing up to class, and not um, yeah, talking back in class, and just like getting in trouble a lot. And the school was like, trying to figure out a way to get me to stay in school, and to participate. And they're
So
like,
you
well,
had you had like a rebellious side to you, huh?
yeah, which is hilarious, because
Yeah.
if you talk to my family, they're like, Kat always is the goody two shoes. And I'm like, you guys are all just worse than I
Yeah.
am.
Yeah.
But
So the you sort of getting involved with running was maybe a way for you to be a little bit more involved with your academics, or?
well, they told me that because I had like racked up. So every time I missed a class, the way this was structured, like you get a set of demerits, and like
Mm,
every demerit, like one, but like missing, like every demerit was like an hour of detention. It was structured like that. So
yeah.
like a few weeks into school, it was like my freshman year of high school, and a few years into school, or a few weeks into school, and I had like collected a whole semester's worth of detention already.
Oh
And they were like, you can
no.
either do this detention, or you can join a sport. And
Uh-huh.
this was their way of just like keep getting me into something, which I really needed.
Wow.
And like I didn't realize it was awesome. But so then I tried out for the JV volleyball team and got cut,
Mm.
and joined the cross country team. Immediately fell in love. Like first few practices, I was like, wow, this feels good. And then again, like for someone who's just, a big family, not like a lot of structure, and not a lot of, I didn't like have a curfew, and I didn't have, so I was like totally taking advantage of all of that. And I just didn't
Yeah.
have anything to like keep me grounded. And then I started winning races. I was good immediately, big fish in a
uh,
small pond, and it gave me something to care about. And if
yeah.
I missed school, then I couldn't race, and so it's super cool. And like again, just totally life changing.
What an interesting thing. And I mean, it just sort of reminds me of something I've been involved in, and that is, volunteering in prisons and stuff. And I think, again, not to draw like exact comparisons, but I think it's similar in that, instead of like punishing you for these, quote unquote transgressions against, the academic institution, and instead of,
Hmm.
like forcing you to, you know, do detention or other types of punishment, they gave you an opportunity to be more involved and to be productive with your time and to
Hmm.
discover a talent with yourself. And I think the parallel with my experience at working with guys in prison is so similar in that these guys, like you, potentially didn't have a lot of direction, didn't have a lot of things to sort of keep them grounded, to keep them tethered, to give them a sense of purpose. But once you sort of give them the opportunity to be successful and to discover their new talents, then man, they are just on fire, and they just get addicted to it, and they feel that sense of, I do have a talent, I am good at something. And then, the rest is sort of like, the productivity just sort of cascades from there. So,
Hmm.
I know that you eventually went to Santa Barbara to school where you ran a little bit. I want to hear a little bit about that history, but maybe also, since we don't want to spend all of our time on sort of like your formative years, like catch us up to when you ultimately went and did the through hike of the Appalachian Trail. Like, what was that transition like, moving to the mainland to run, and then ultimately, how the hell did you find yourself on the AT going for a through hike?
Okay, this is so funny, and I know I've talked about this before, but it's honestly like such a great story.
Yeah.
And so I show up 17 years old, for I was a top recruit for UC Santa Barbara
Yeah.
for the 800 specifically. I had a lot of 800 success,
Yeah.
in high school, and got there. And due to a lot of things, I think first being the youngest on the team, second just like so much of like my running did come from a place of, you know, I am the best and I do
Mm.
this because I'm the best. And all of a
Uh,
sudden, I was in Hawaii where it's easy to be the best. There's not that many runners, there's not, it's not competitive, it's not a big stage. And then I go to a UC school in California and I get there and I'm all, hot shit. Like I got recruited. I don't have to pay for school.
yeah, yeah.
And I almost immediately, getting dropped in workouts, not enjoying workouts, and then also the culture
Mm.
of, under eating and being competitive with food, which is, just, and I think it's so cool that so many people are talking about eating disorders, and
Especially
because
right
it,
now. I mean, it's like, it's like awareness month or whatever. But yeah, it's amazing,
well,
how
and I think it's so important that we're,
yeah.
everyone is saying, like, yeah, this is something I experienced too, because to normalize it, that's how we can fix it. And that's it. Because for when, I don't know, 10 years ago, it's something you shoved under the rug. No one,
Yeah.
and when I was dealing with all my eating disorder stuff, and again, this is the first time I've ever talked about this publicly, but like my whole family was like, shh, don't talk about it,
Uh,
just talk. And like I think, and because of that, it, the problem, it almost is enticing for other women, I think, when it's like shoved under the, this person's
yeah.
getting attention and it's shoved under the rug. But anyway, so all that, like disordered eating, feeling like you know, not willing to put in the work to be the best, and that's what it came down to. Like I was really humbled when I got there, and instead of having the attitude that I was gonna put the work put in the work to be where I wanted to be, I was like, I just quit. And it's due to a lot of reasons. I was
Hmm.
alone in a new place,
Yeah.
didn't know anyone. And also, like, I was having a really hard time connecting.
Yeah.
Just I didn't relate to anyone, and partial that's probably my fault. I was probably really closed off. So anyway, I end up quitting the team. Which, like, quitting that meant quitting school for me at that point.
Oh, right.
Um,
Because you were on
yeah.
scholarship.
hmm
Wow.
Quit the team, quit school. Um, then go to live with my mom and dad are split up for a long time at this point. Go live with her on the East Coast
Mm-hmm.
for a little while. I'm working two jobs. I'm working at Wilbur's, this general store in Little Compton, Rhode Island, which is like where my mom grew up. Teeny tiny town. This general
Yeah.
store has been open since 1850. Like, when I go in there, there's like a big photo of me crossing the finish line at Western at this little general
Yes.
store because I
Oh,
worked
we
there for
gotta
so long.
take a picture and post it. We got to see this. Yeah.
I have posted it. I'll send
Oh,
it to
okay.
you. It's
Okay.
there.
Sweet.
And like, it's I gotta say, my biggest fans are in that town, and it's so special.
Yes.
But I'm
Awesome.
working, at that job from, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. and then going and waiting tables at Texas Roadhouse, which is in Massachusetts, so like 45 minutes,
Yeah.
just trying to make money to figure out what I'm gonna do. And then, one, I'm also like obsessively reading blogs about like outdoor adventures because in Little Compton, there's not really, it's the winter time and I'm used to like nice weather and I'm trying to figure out, what it's not quite winter. I guess it's like spring and I'm just like super anxious not being outside all the time. And
Yeah.
it's, it's my first winter really, and I've spent it there and it's gray.
Yeah.
So I'm like obsessively reading blogs and I like go to Maine to do like a backpacking trip by myself. And I literally bring like, I'm 19. I bring some beers, bring peanut butter and some water, and that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And I do some bike pack, like I like do some hiking, and I actually talked to someone who tells me about through hiking the Appalachian Trail,
Hmm.
and that he'd done it, and I was like, I you can do that like that. You, it blew
Was
my
it like an
mind.
instantaneous thing where you're like, I am gonna do that?
Instantaneous.
See,
And
that's
so I
exactly how it was for me too when I learned about ultra running. I mean, not to make comparisons, but it's so true. It's like as soon as I learned that the Leadville 100 existed, I was like, I am fucking doing that.
dude, and that's
Nothing that's gonna
you
stop.
know I and that's how ultra running was for me too, and that's
Yeah,
how trails and anything. I think it's just
cool.
about something that's like really out there and be like, oh,
Totally.
someone
Yeah,
did that, I'm gonna do that too, like I have to.
yeah.
And so my mom was like, if you want to do it, fine, I'm not getting involved. So I approached my godmother because, like, if you don't know anything about the AT, you need some serious help. I mean, especially maybe if you're 19, have no idea what you're doing. Like, I needed help with just getting gear sent out to me on the trail, pretty
Yeah.
much, and also getting a ride back, and also like funding it, you know. And my God, this is, my godmother and I were really close. My mom's best friend growing up, and
Uh-huh.
we have had two fights. One was before I started the Appalachian Trail, and she said she was going to support me on it and send me stuff, and then she like learned about what it was and then like tried to pull out, and I'm like, no, you said
No,
you were going to do it, you
I'm
have to.
counting on you.
and
Yeah.
then and then the other one was, she actually crewed me for my first ultra ever, which was also on the East Coast and was also not a race, and it's like I read it on a blog.
Yeah.
And those are the only two fights that we've had, because she was like, this is impossible, and I'm like, no, look, people have done it.
Yeah.
And so I set out on the trail not knowing what I was doing. My godmother finally, like after lots of like convincing and pleading, agreed to help me and meet me in certain spots, and uh help me get home after. And
Yeah.
and also just this, I I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have, and
Yeah.
just like someone to call and like, hey, I realized like I didn't know what a sleeping pad was. And so like I did most of it without a sleeping pad. And
Man, your courage and independence is like so admirable. I mean, the fact that you would take on that challenge at such a young age and sort of like at a point in your life where it seems like you were probably pretty confused about which direction to go. I mean, it's such an amazing thing, and I think speaks volume of sort of like the type of person you are, and reveals probably kind of why you've been able to be so successful as an athlete as well. And I'd love to be able to spend a whole episode to talk about the AT on its own, but I'm sure that's a super long story. But sort of like, I guess let's talk about how you ended up getting into trail running. I think one of the um, kind of cool things about you and about your career. And another thing that I just find so freaking cool is your first 100 miler at what I think is your first 100 miler at Pine to Palm. You were super young. I think you were like 21 or 22, and you had what seemed to be like a freaking vision quest. I mean, you were out there for, you know, 31 hours. And I just did a podcast with Brittany Peterson, and this was something that also happened to her in her career, where in 2013, she did her first 100 miler at Leadville, was chasing cutoffs, finished well below what her
mhm.
talent would indicate that she was capable of. And it seems like the same thing happened to you in your career. So maybe tell us about like how you went from the AT to signing up for that first 100, having such a, what I mean, seems like must have been a super hard day out. And what
Yeah,
would have like kept you in the sport after that instead of quitting altogether?
totally. Oh, yeah. I was not quitting after Pine to Palm. So actually, so rewind, finished the AT, super inspired by outdoor industry, moved back to Santa Barbara, like take classes both at the community college and online, and end up, getting a degree. And while I'm doing this, I'm working full time as a nighttime security guard, as a nighttime, clothes folder at Hollister, like
Really?
backstocking shelves,
Working the
and then
graveyard shift?
also two graveyard shifts,
Wow.
and 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 which like were ended up being awesome jobs and good money, because in California you have to get time and a half for any graveyard shift, so like
Oh,
really good money. And then I'm so inspired by the Appalachian Trail that I'm go full in on the outdoor industry, start working for Santa Barbara Adventure Company, have this awesome mentor who teaches me how to be a backpack guide. And I'm like full on guiding too on weekends, and learning how to be a guide, and canoe guide on the Colorado, and a backpack guide in the High Sierra. And like best experience ever, fully immersed
wow.
in the outdoor industry. I'm like, screw running, this is going to be my career.
Uh-huh.
And I decide that like I want to take this career and move to Colorado. So not knowing where I'm going to move, I just point my car to Colorado, end up in Winter Park somehow. Don't know anyone, and end up there doing ski guide, raft guide, super fun. And while I'm doing this, like I'm slowly, some of my friends in California had been running ultras. So like I'm like commuting back and forth between California. And
Yeah.
so Luis Escobar, actually, I knew him because he photographed one of my track meets
Yeah.
and while I was injured.
Yeah.
And he,
Luis Escobar, who's a legendary sort of character on the ultra circuit, photographer and runner himself, race director too, down in Central
yeah.
Coast of California. I think he lives in San Luis Obispo now, but yeah, in the same
So
neighborhood.
yeah, so he like kind of mentored me along with this guiding mentor. I did some like ultras, but like I wasn't running, I wasn't training. But so I'm like going back and forth between Colorado and California because I'm guiding. But it's a seasonal industry, so you have like a few really intense weeks and then a few weeks off.
Yeah.
So when I'm going back in California, I like am like just running these crazy ultras and also partying like crazy. Like,
We're the same person, Kat. I feel I identify with you so much because, man,
well, that's pretty cool.
my college days and early 20s and late 20s really still, yeah, we're filled with
Still got
way too
time.
much partying. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
so yeah, so actually, I was doing Lewis's races, and also like Lewis and I and a group of people, did a rim to rim. We were doing the 9 trails route at one point. Like Lewis and I were doing 9 trails like every weekend. I'd call him and be like, "What are you doing this weekend? Let's
Yeah.
do 9 trails." And we'd like chug beers it was so fun. It was like, and thinking about that now, and we weren't going fast. And I want to say also, through all of
Yeah.
this time, I'm wearing Brook shoes. Like,
Okay.
I
Awesome.
like totally, I was actively, yeah,
We'll come
wearing
back
Brooks.
to that yeah, we'll come back to that a little later. Yeah. Cool.
And but anyway, um, so I'd actually done Bryce 100,
Mm.
and I was in California on a break, and I was like, Ren, who is my guiding mentor,
Mm-hmm.
I was there staying with him, and I had some friends from high school visiting Santa Barbara, and I didn't have a place there. I'm like living in my car, and I didn't, and so I'm breaking into a high school friend's apartment, and another high school friend. I'd done Bryce, got DFL there, and I finished. It took me so long that I didn't actually get a finish, but they gave me a buckle, but it wasn't an official finish. It took like 37 hours. I'd had like
No
really crazy
way.
bronchitis. Yeah.
And this is before
This
the Pine de
is
Palm?
before Pine de Palm. This is June.
Wow.
So
So
like,
you had
actually, I have like a total vision quest there. I'm like, so I think I like am eating pro bars the whole time. First, I run like an hour 10 first 10 miles. Like Tim
yeah.
Olson, it was there. I didn't know who, I like don't know the ultra scene. I like just am running these races. And Tim Olson, fresh off like a Western States, is
Yeah.
checking my tonsils because my rate, like I have no voice. And he's like, "I'm pretty sure you're really sick." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm fine." And then classically, my college friend is like, "Here, chug this Gatorade." My whole crew is drunk. Like, just like my pacer is like pacing me and puking all over himself,
Yeah.
like so hilarious.
This is
And
so
so I
funny because the same shit has happened with me. And all my from my college buddies come to
oh
crew for me and just get hammered and
right,
yeah.
exact. So fast forward, Pine to Pine, I finish Bryce, and I'm like, God damn it, I know I can do better than that. That was pathetic. Like, I want another one. Give
Yeah.
me another one. Sign up for Pine to Palm. So 2 weekends before Pine to Palm, I am again in Santa Barbara. A few of my high school friends, like a bunch of us all moved to Santa Barbara together from Hawaii,
Mhm.
and we're all and like one of them is visiting, and I'm in Colorado at this point, but like commuting back and forth, and my friend is visiting, and my other friends were out, and we were coming home from the bars, and I go to climb through the window of one of my longtime friends. Something I've done a million times. Climb
Yeah.
through my friend Kyle's apartment,
Yeah.
um, who grew up in Hawaii. Another Caucasian dude. We got super close
Yeah.
growing up. Um, and he was breaking into his apartment. My other friend from Hawaii is so drunk, she is like thinks I'm scared to climb through, pushes me through the window. This is the week before Pine to Palm, and I hit my knee so hard on the bathtub. I find out later that my patella is fully cracked.
Oh no.
But I find this out after Pine to Palm.
Yeah.
So this is 2 weeks before, and I have a canoe trip that I have to work. That's why I'm back in Santa Barbara. Have
Jeez.
worked this canoe trip, then like literally hitch a ride to Oregon. Like I'm hitchhiking to Oregon
Wow.
through like
Yeah.
to get to Pine to Palm. And I can hardly walk, obviously. And I'm like, I'm not, I paid whatever it was, like $300 for this race.
Yeah.
I'm not like pulling out. And I was like, I have to do it. So literally walked the whole thing, and the downhills I all walked backwards. And I'm super young and everyone's so worried about me. And luckily Hal is like, just let her do it. Just let her. What's the worst that's gonna happen?
Yeah, yeah.
So I actually saw the next time I saw Hal, because these like this race, Pine to Palm in Western States, it's like 3 years apart maybe.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and I was 25 when I won Western,
Yeah.
and I see Hal. I'm winning Western at Corey Road, and I'm like, Hal, do you remember me? I'm the girl that walked your whole race with a broken kneecap. And he's like, yeah, but you gotta go,
You
Kat.
gotta
You got
go.
bagged.
Yeah, you can't
And
stop me.
chasing you.
And Corey Road is
But
mile 90 of Western States, which I want to talk about next. But yeah, finish up the Pine to Palm story before we get to that. So
yeah,
you
I
just
mean, there's
walked
not
the whole
much to it.
freaking
Is I
thing.
walked I literally walked the whole race. Like I'm walking all the downhills backwards. Like all the sweet ladies at the aid stations are like, we need to pull her out. We need to do something. I'm like, anyone have any duct tape? I'm
Yeah.
gonna tape my knee.
Dude,
I'm
Kat,
fine.
you're like the most hardcore person I know. I mean, having admittedly not known a lot about you before we just picked up this Zoom call, it's like, holy smokes, growing up in Hawaii and then freaking just doing the AT off the couch with like no knowledge. And then vision questing Bryce and then vision questing Pine to Palm. It's like, holy smokes. You've got
Yeah.
so many great stories under your belt. And I guess let's transition to another amazing story that wasn't quite as much of a vision quest, but I think probably holds a similar sort of like, yeah, good memory in your life and in your career. And that is your victory at the Western States 100 back in 2017. And
Mm-hmm.
it's such an interesting story too, because you'd had some success at that point. Obviously we've sort of focused on your vision quests, but
Mm-hmm.
you'd had some good races in between Pine to Palm and Western States, but you were still sort of an unknown quantity within the sport. I mean, it wasn't as if you came in as one of the favorites to win the race that
Mm-hmm.
day. And you came in, you're 25 years old. You got in with one ticket in the lottery. And it seems that you came in with the attitude that you were there to compete and to win. And I think this is a revealing thing because I think it takes that type of attitude to actually win the race.
Totally.
So maybe talk a little bit about that psychology. Like when you got in with one ticket, what gave you the belief in yourself that you could win the race?
And I coach some athletes now, and I tell them this, and I tell them that this is like the number one indicator of whether you're going to be successful in the sport. And I knew, from when I started like at Lewis's races at 20 years old, and I'm not doing like anything crazy, but I just knew. Maybe it's because I felt at home in the sport, but I knew in my bones that I could be good at this. Like
Yeah.
in my bones, in my stomach, in my heart, I was like, I can be good at this sport.
Yeah.
And and I love running, and I love trails, and I love outdoors, and I just worked really hard. And I had been working really hard, and when I got in on that one ticket, um, I knew I was going to be a contender, and I again like, and I haven't had this gut feeling about a race since, but like I had a gut feeling that I was going to
Really?
win. Yeah,
Wow.
and like just, and I trained with intention every day, and I didn't like train a ton. It didn't, and I haven't been able to replicate this, and I am working back towards it because it
Yeah.
just takes us. And I think part of that is being the underdog. And but I just knew in my bones that from like December, that I was going to have a good day.
Wow.
And worked really hard. And I gotta say, I was crazy fit too. I have not been that fit since.
Yeah.
And you know, and
So
I and I did.
how did that sort of change your life? I mean, you sort of felt in your bones that you're going to have this amazing day and it comes to fruition. It's something that we all dream about achieving in our careers. And I think, for you, it's such an interesting thing because like it seems like one of those moments in our lives, and we could probably all point to it in one degree or another, in one context or another, maybe not necessarily in running, where just like everything just kind of goes our way and works out just absolutely perfectly,
Hmm.
and for you, like miraculously getting into the race with one ticket is the first way that it went your way, to win on
Hmm.
your first try after, paying your dues as an ultra runner, but you're still only 25 freaking years old.
I
And,
know.
like I imagine that it really changed your life. Like after that, you sort of became a professional athlete. So like maybe, yeah, talk a little bit about the immediate aftermath there. Like how did that change your life and impact sort of your perception of who you are, what you could achieve, and your relationship to the sport?
I think this answer is not going to be what you expect, but maybe it is. So first, I have to rewind a little bit. I got in a car accident in 2015 where I got a pelvic ring stress fracture, or not
Hmm.
stress fracture, impact fracture, and which causes a lot of stabilization issues. And I came back, and just like 12 weeks after the accident, had like my pelvis had like I'd hardly gotten that fracture cleared. I ran the Bear 100, like kind of pushed too fast, and then right around the time of Western States, it started really catching up to me. Um, and like before, like maybe the 4 months before, and again, like I knew in my bones that I could be good, and I knew, and I wasn't going to let anything stop me from like seizing this opportunity.
Hmm.
But something that like a lot of people don't know is that training block, first, like my mileage is really low because I was in a lot of pain all the time.
Hmm.
Like I wasn't really going over 60 miles. And second, I was also getting body work just to try and like be able to run. I was getting body work 4 days a week.
Really?
And again, teacher salary, almost nothing, like
Yeah.
so flat broke.
Yeah.
Um, Treating my, putting everything, and that's the other thing. Like I was putting all my money and everything I had into running,
Wow.
and and just kind of, and I don't want to say I was banking on being a professional runner, but like I didn't really have a thought past Western. I was like, I'm gonna win this race, and then we'll figure everything out. But like 4 days a week getting body work. There's this really great acupuncturist here who's a friend of ours at the like Rocky Mountain Runners, and her name's Jenna Ellis from Boulder AccuSport.
Hmm.
And I, thank God I had her.
Yeah.
And so she like so helpful. But I saw, and I actually like before the race, the week before the race, I was it's from driving there from Colorado. Like my back really flared up, which caused it. So I had a lot of, since it's a stabilization issue, like it caused a lot of nerve pain. So all I was
Mm.
feeling was nerve pain.
Mm.
And in my head, I'm like, it's just nerve pain. Like you can't really do any damage. And that's how I, kind of rationalize training through it and racing through it. But
Yeah.
um, then after Western States, it all I did it. I knew I was going to do it, and like the first, 10 miles of the race, my back was really acting up. And, then it like, again, miraculously loosened up, which
Mm.
like doesn't always happen. And then after the race, like, things do kind of just come crashing down. Like my back becomes to a point where I can't like really train more than 3 weeks at a time. Like I train 3 weeks and then it gets
Yeah.
bad, train 3 weeks and it gets bad. And you know, and then like I'm a
So do you
professional
think that
runner.
like the race performance itself sort of and maybe like the emotional psychological release of like achieving something super great, like that the decompression immediately thereafter made the physical injuries and the consequences of the traveling and the I'm sorry, of the training and the racing sort of make the back issue flare up?
Uh, and I don't want to say flare up. First, I like had to financially recover from the all the body work, and like I
Yeah,
had to.
yeah,
I'd lost my job. I got laid off from the
yeah,
private school I was working at.
yeah.
Had sunk all my money. I was in debt going just doing body work
Wow.
from my back. And so I couldn't. So after Western, like I'd signed an awesome Solomon contract.
Yeah.
Um, but I still had to like not do the body work. I didn't have anything
Yeah.
inside. So and I was able to train like through the summer because obviously I did that FKT, but even before that, like in tears, like being like, I feel broken, like what is wrong?
Huh.
And then in 2018, 2019, I finally go like see some specialists, and I like they validate my pain, like, oh yeah, your fracture hasn't actually fully healed and stuff like that. And but yeah, totally, just the accumulation of just like the emotional, so much energy went into Western,
Yeah.
from the second I got in. And I know it's only 6 months, but like I'm also working 40 hours a week, getting my master, or trying
Yeah.
to get my master's, have this, trying to train, and like with this crazy goal that like I'm not really talking about. And but it is, having a goal like that, it's really spectacular, but it also is a lot of emotional weight.
Totally. And then after
And
after it's success, you successfully achieve it, you don't have that carrot at the end of the stick anymore. And there is like a sort of yeah, like a sense of loss or disappointment after that happens. I mean, it's this phenomenon that happens to Olympic athletes too. They just made a documentary about it, the weight of gold, where
mhm,
even if you're super successful, afterwards you can go through almost like a mourning period, like a sense of loss for having no longer or no longer having this target to sort of aim your energy and your spirit and your goals towards every single day. And
mhm.
so it seems like something similar happened to you. And I'm curious too. I mean, because I sort of copy pasted something that you posted on the internet, and you're a great writer, man. You're so good at sharing things, and I just wanted to read something that I think is really interesting from this time, because it sort of encapsulates, I think, everything that we're talking about right now. And you say, this is from your Instagram, and it's just an excerpt from a post from, I don't know, several weeks ago. But you said, when I got in with one lottery ticket in December of 2016, I made the silent goal to Ryan, your partner, and my coach that I was in it to win it. That required a degree of neuroticism. My sole focus was on work and running. Other facets of my life fell to the wayside. I won the race, but I also lost my job. I held on to those neuroticisms in the months that followed, knowing that they did lead to life-changing achievements, but without a full-time job to balance me out, I became wound up. Those neuroticisms wound me up so tight the rest of the world seemed bleak. I wasn't having fun, even when I was doing the thing I loved most, which was running. It took a few years for me to unwind, slowly untying the knots of perfectionism that make life strained and unenjoyable. My fire was burning too hot and I burned out. But when my foundation went up in flames and all that was left was ash, it gave me space to regrow. And I think that's a beautiful way to sort of, say what we're talking about. Like, it seems like you put everything into it and you were rewarded with an amazing life experience, but there was a sense of imbalance, right? You're committing every dollar you have to keeping yourself, you know, able to run down a trail. And then
Mhm.
once the cougar is on your trophy shelf, it seems like everything sort of came crashing down there. So, I mean, talk a little bit about how you navigated that period. How did you manage to regrow?
Yeah, man, you that got me like teary-eyed, just because it is so painful, and
Yeah.
it's not something people talk about, and like it hard. And I kind of, this is funny because I kind of have a qualm with David Goggins for this reason, because he put
This is a
so
contrarian take. This is a contrarian take. He's
yeah.
like the
And
everybody loves David Goggins, be so
totally,
hardcore, no complaints ever. So sorry,
but
go ahead.
no, don't be sorry. But as someone who, and like, man, and I, again, like, I haven't read his book. I've just listened to little excerpts of it, and have listened to podcasts. But again, like, I have to turn it off because I'm like, this is so unhealthy. And as someone who has been there, and again, like someone who is so wound up, like when all you can think about is the next run, the next run, the next run, or doing the body work, like, oh, I can't afford body work right now, so I'm going to spend like 2 hours rolling, like, oh, I don't really have 2 hours because I have to get this done, but screw that, I'm going to spend 2 hours rolling.
Yeah.
Like, oh, like this fun party that I'm at, one of my good friends is turning 30, but it's 8:30, I gotta go, and that's not me. I'm someone that, you know, does, likes to have a couple drinks with friends, and like
Yeah.
likes to do crazy impulsive things, and so like all of that fell. And I'm not saying, there has to be balance. Like I obviously can't do that and be successful like I did when I ran Pine to Palm. I can't just like rage all the time,
Yeah.
and then wake up at 4 in the morning for these adventures. But also like I can't, I just, maybe it's just because like I'm a person of extremes that I've had to, balance myself out in this way. Like the pendulum just has not been able to sit in the middle. Um, but when I just hear the little things that David Goggins says, and from someone who's like held those characteristics and like has sat in that and been so unhappy and like not even realizing how unhappy I
Yeah.
am, like lonely, not having, not being able to be present with my family, with my friends,
Yeah.
just because I'm thinking about running. And um, that's it. That's why, I think there's got to be a limit to pushing your limits,
Yeah. Well, there's got to be balance. Yeah, there's got to be balance,
totally.
right?
And there,
And it does, probably for the majority of people to win Western states, it requires a level of imbalance, a level of dedication to achieve something like that. And so I don't know, it's a theme that you see in all different sports and really in all different walks of life too. I mean, you see examples of the people who are theoretically the most successful people in the world who, their relationships fall apart. They don't have presence or relationships with their kids because all they do is work. And I don't know. I mean, it's just sort of like there's examples of this in everything. And so I think it's important for people to sort of hear people like you who do have cougar trophies sitting on your shelves to understand, like this shit comes at a cost and you learn, I mean, from the good things, but the good things often lead to hard things, and hard things often lead to good things. And, it's all about
mhm,
being human and riding those waves. So I'm super
totally. And
appreciative. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I just want to make it clear to anyone listening that I'm not saying don't work hard, and I'm not saying go chase your dreams.
Yeah.
But when you do catch your dreams, take a second, take a few
Yes.
weeks, and, you know, and I know it's hard to like refocus that energy, but maybe a good practice like right after is to think about where you can, instead of refocusing, just think about dispersing it for a few weeks,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I do think it's really important to be unbalanced sometimes. And I certainly, I want to win Western again. I
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to do really big things in the sport. And I feel like I can still.
Yeah.
But I think, and that's going to cause some more unbalance. But like, and I
Yeah.
think for anyone listening, like, I'm not saying don't go for it, because absolutely go for whatever you're dreaming of. It's totally worth it. But when it's done, like, don't just refocus to the next thing.
Yeah.
That,
Well, Kat, this is awesome, man. Thank you so much for speaking so honestly about that period of your career, because it's so interesting, and I think there's so many good pieces of wisdom in what you just said. And I think now's a good time to transition to another, super positive thing that's happened recently, and something that you announced just a few days ago, and that is your new partnership with Brooks. Maybe talk a little bit about how that partnership came about. Any insights you can provide into sort of the process of having an existing partnership kind of coming to a close, and
mhm,
vetting new partners, and how you and Brooks came to be in communication, and how that relationship became official.
totally. So I knew my Solomon contract was coming to an end. And I had a lot of growth in Salomon, and they're obviously like one of the leading brands. I knew I wanted to move on, and I knew that I really liked Brooks shoes. Like, I'd gotten my hands on a pair of Catamounts a few months before, and also I'd
Which
been
is
running in their road shoes.
the
Yeah, it's their,
Catamounts, just for people to, that's their new trail shoe, which apparently,
yeah,
people really like. So go ahead.
yeah, it's awesome, and it's a really high performing trail shoe, like, and transitions really well from any terrain.
Yeah.
And I'd gotten my hands on a pair of those, and as I mentioned before, like, I'd been running in Brooks in high school, college, and then when I got into trail, I like my first pair of trail shoes. I bought a pair of what was the Pure Grits on eBay used, because I was like, I have to wear a pair of Brooks shoes, but I can't afford, it was probably like $110 back then. So,
Right.
I bought a used pair of Pure Grits for like
Ooh.
30 on eBay. and um and so right before my contract expired, like, I didn't know who was managing athletes, but I actively sought out whoever was managing the elite athletes at Brooks.
Yeah.
And I know Camila a little bit, but I didn't really know her. And so I just like went through like any acquaintance that I had. And this maybe speaks to just my personality. Like, when I want something, I actively like really work at it. So I'm like Facebook messaging random people like, "Hey, I see on your LinkedIn that you work for Brooks. Do you like, my name is Kat Bradley and I won Western States in 2017. I
Yeah.
also have an 800-meter PR, blah blah blah. Like please sponsor me."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I too funny, and I finally, like, and my contract's coming to an end, and I'm like talking to a few other brands, but nothing that really, I'm like really just like actively, I'm disappointed, and I'm actively just pursuing Brooks, and it's
Yeah.
December 31st, finally, and like, no luck, no luck, no luck. This is going on for months of me just like intensely LinkedIn and Facebook stalking people, and spending hours and hours. And finally, I get an email from Julie Cully saying like, "Hey, I would love to talk to you." Like, and that's why they call me Queen of the Follow Up. Don't stop emailing.
Yeah. So that's awesome. One of the things I'm curious about, you mentioned the Pure Grit, and obviously, like, Brooks this is still the sponsor of Scott Jurek, a legend in the trail and ultra running space, and they made the Cascadia, which is probably the best selling trail shoe of all time, but they haven't had a lot of presence in the trail scene recently. Is there anything you can tell us about sort of Brooks' longer term vision and commitment to the trail scene? Obviously, they've just released this Catamount trail shoe, which,
Mhm,
like I said, has had rave reviews and probably is doing pretty well in the market. Is there anything else
mhm.
that you can tell us about, what they're thinking about
um,
as it relates to trail running and athletes?
so I will say, and this, will speak volumes to anyone who knows the trail scene, and especially how athlete structures are usually, athlete sponsorships are usually structured.
Hmm.
They are sinking as much money and time, into the trail scene, trail shoes, and trail athletes as they are into all of the road athletes.
Oh, great.
So their goal is that their highest performing trail athlete will make as much and have as much impact on the brand, and have, a career long relationship, just like the road athletes do. They're
Wow.
sinking everything into it, which, I think is incredible. And it's, feels really cool to be on the forefront of that.
Yeah.
I know there's some really cool things coming down the pipeline, and I think it's just so awesome that they want their athletes involved, and they want our input, and they care about, um, making really high performance gear. They
Yeah.
don't want to release anything that's just like okay,
Yeah.
they only want to release. And that, the catamount is just such an amazing start of
Yeah.
what it's going to be. And it's cool.
Yeah, I actually met Brian, Brian. God, I'm forgetting his last name. I think it's Bark, maybe Brian Bark.
Hmm.
You probably haven't met him yet, but he's friends with Caitlin Gerben, and he actually crewed and paced Caitlin Gerben during her Wonderland Trail FKT. So I had a chance to interact with him there, and he's apparently the guy who designed and developed the Catamount. So
Hmm.
he's a good guy who you'll get to connect with. And I did see also on Twitter today that Des Linden is going to be trying to go after the 50K world record. So
I saw that as I was walking here to do the
yeah,
podcast. I'm in like a community center right
yeah,
now, and I saw it
yep,
and I was like, oh shit. And I
yeah,
thought to myself, I'm like, man, because that was something in the back of my head. I was like,
right,
maybe. But
yeah,
man, super cool. Also, I screenshotted it the other day. When I announced with Brooks, and all the Brooks employees were posting it, she started following me. I was like, I'm
heck
gonna
yeah.
save this for the
She's a hero, man.
Des, do
She's
you
a
need
hero.
crew?
Yeah. Well, cool. Well,
Yeah, definitely.
congratulations about that. I mean, that seems like a great move for you and a great fit between an athlete and a brand. And so I wish you guys nothing but the best. And we'll look forward to seeing more what Brooks is doing and how you're going to contribute. Let's talk a little bit before we sort of wind down about the race that you had last weekend, because, you're such a great writer, and you posted about, making a bunch of rookie mistakes again and being rusty. And I talked to both Tyler Green and Brittany Peterson after they won Black Canyon, and both of them, didn't seem to feel like they were rusty at all, having taken a year off from competition. And I totally feel like, the first race that I do back is going to be completely awful, that I always have to sort of like work through some rust. And it seems like you had to work through a little rust this past weekend. So tell us about the Mesquite Canyon 30K, what you relearned about the sport through some rookie mistakes.
Yeah. So hilarious. So, first race, and also first race in new gear, which the gear that I had from Brooks wasn't the issue. But the day before, and classic first time racer mistake. Day before, I'm like, what's the worst that can happen? I'm going to go to Target and buy, something, a water bottle that I can use as a handheld, and like a belt to put some gels in. Um, and I buy like a little bottle and this belt, and like don't touch them until I'm like, cool, check off the list, got them all prepared. Morning of, I'm putting it on. I can't close the water bottle all the way, A. And B, the belt is like, it's like a one size fits all belt, but like it is too big. So like, and I like, slept in, didn't really care. Like 10 minutes before the race, I put the belt on. I'm like, shit, it's like too big. This isn't gonna stay on. I have no pockets. Like, what am I gonna do? Use my two bottom race pins to pin it together. I'm like, okay, fine, this will work, but don't really resolve the leaking water bottle issue.
Yeah.
So I'm running with Courtney Barnes, who is a transitioning track athlete into the trail. Super fun. And we're
Sweet.
running in this awesome pack, chit chatting away. And I'm like, I'm like getting all wet. And she's like, yeah, you're spraying me with water everywhere. Like you're spraying me. I'm soaking wet. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
God, I'm so sorry. I mostly feel bad about getting her wet. I'm like,
Yeah.
like whatever, fine. And but there's no like real aids, it's a 30K, and there's no real aid stations to the end. There's like one at mile 4 and like one at mile 18 or something. And I'm I know my water bottle's empty, don't stop at mile 4. And so the way the course works, it's like 8 miles of really flowy, like slightly uphill but fast trail. And then you start like climbing, and it's this really steep and really technical climb, and it takes me off guard. And second of all, it's 80 degrees, and it's 80 degrees at 8 a.m.
Yeah.
And it also hasn't really, it's been really, we've had, an unusually cold winter or a
Yeah.
few weeks in Boulder.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, Courtney is like, and usually I'm the one that's good at technical terrain, but having not really run on trails in the last few years, like with COVID and me, I just moved back down to Boulder, but I was in Ned. Like I didn't really get to run on a lot of trails
Yeah.
for a while. And then I also took, I don't know if I took almost 10 weeks zilch exercise.
Really.
Didn't run, didn't do any exercise. I took that all off in the fall, and like have just slowly been
Slowly
transitioning
building.
back. So anyway, I'm like trying to move over this technical terrain, like feeling just like a total goofball, and like tripping, like cutting up my arms on the rocks, like I'm like, what the heck, whose body is this? And then I go to take a sip of water, and I'm like, oh yeah, it actually is all gone. And I'm like, again, don't think about it too hard, don't really make a big deal about it. Get to the top of the climb. I can see Courtney like the whole time we're climbing. She's like just 50 feet in front of me.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, that's that carrot, like it's keeping me moving. But as
Yeah.
soon as we get to the top, she drops me. She goes. It's like super technical descent, and I'm again like, whose body is this? Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't even. What are these rocks doing here? I've been running on creek path, and
Yeah.
just and I, take the gas off. I start, I'm like, fine, a second. Again, total rookie mistake. Something I wouldn't do if I was racing a lot, because
Yeah.
like when you're racing the
You're
whole
racing.
time.
Yeah.
And so I totally took the gas off and was eating. Also, I had like a gel, or two, a spring gel, which are awesome, but also you need water. So I'm going down this descent, and all of a sudden I get caught by this girl. And I'm like, what race are you running? She's like, the 30K. I'm like, pick it up, pick it up. And like, so I am able to put some distance on her, but like both of us are, running pretty hard, throwing down. And then all of a sudden it flattens out a little bit. And again, haven't had any water, have had in like 2.5 hours, 2 gels. And we're going like slightly uphill to the finish, and it's she's like 50 feet behind me, and I'm running as fast as I can, but like not going very fast. And also I keep almost puking, when it's like in the back of your throat.
Yeah.
And you're and I'm just like keep looking back, and she's getting closer. I'm like, no, I can't. Why can't I make my legs move any faster?
Yeah.
And eventually I can see the finish line. She passes me, high five, whatever. And I stop, puke like all over myself in the most disgusting way. And I'm like, geez,
You're like, well,
Louise.
welcome back to racing.
I know, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
And cross the finish line, people are trying to hug. I'm like, you don't want to
You
touch
don't
me.
want to hug me.
I actually texted my coach, and he's like, we got to work on this puking thing. And I'm like, yeah, for nothing else, so I don't have to burn my clothes
so
after.
that I can hug people after the race.
Yeah. Or like, fine,
Yeah.
it's COVID, we don't have to hug, but my laundry is still sitting in a paper bag, and I peeked in there, and I was like, oh God, I might have to just throw that away.
Yeah.
But
well,
yeah.
well, again, it's on your website you call yourself a lifelong learner, and it's important to have those learning experiences again, and to get the competitive juices flowing. So kudos to you for battling it out, and still, as is a theme in your career, still seeing it through to the end, even when it turns into a vision quest. So that's really
Yeah, and
cool.
it was fun. And
Yeah.
like, that's something, and sometimes I question, I'm like, do I, especially like right before races, I'm like, do I actually really like racing?
Yeah.
I'm like, is this something that I really like, or is it
Yeah.
like some weird ego trip? And it goes to show that like, even at the end, even when I remember thinking, she's 50 feet behind me, and I'm like running as hard as I can, like feeling
Yeah.
terrible, like about to puke, feeling terrible, pretending like I can hold her off when I know damn well I can't. I'm like,
Yeah.
and I remember thinking in that moment, I'm like, so do I actually like this? And I remember in that moment, like, this is fun. Like, I'm
Yeah.
glad she's chasing me right now, even though it would have been cool to just cruise it in, like have an easy win, like, woo, I'm back.
Yeah.
I had more fun doing it this way. And I think
Yeah.
that says something about, the sport and how
Totally.
cool it is.
Yeah. And another great little nugget of wisdom to leave people with. So, Kat, let's sign off. I so appreciate all your time. This has been an awesome conversation. So much, honesty and candor, and I think just important messages for people to take away from this episode. So, just sort of as we wind down, why don't you tell people what you have on the docket coming up? Obviously, understanding that everything's unpredictable now. What's inspiring for you? What's motivating you? What are you sort of aiming towards if and when we ever get back to normalcy?
You know what? My career, I've had a lot of success in the 100-mile distance.
Yeah.
And this year's all about racing shorter and faster. And when we say shorter, it's still like 100K. So I'm,
Yeah.
racing CCC this year. And hopefully it happens, and I'm also signed up for both Mont Blanc Marathon and Mont Blanc 90K. So we'll see which one I run.
Sweet.
But I just want to, get out of my comfort zone with some of those shorter, faster stuff again. I know I have the leg speed. It's just like the racing strategy. It's uncomfortable. It's,
Mm-hmm.
it's uncomfortable and it's harder. And, I think sometimes I've just, that comfort zone of just, running, moderate for 100 miles is
Yeah.
mentally a lot less scary, I think, than running like
Huh.
balls out for 100K.
I'm the
So,
same
and I'm,
way. Yeah.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited to, kind of confront that fear a little bit this season. So we'll
Sweet.
see. And again, both of my big races are in Europe this year. So, oh yeah, and then I'm also hopefully racing CIM with a big team of Brooks athletes. So
Awesome.
I've run a 2:43 marathon, and I'm hoping to get under that.
Awesome. Well, Kat, good luck with everything. I'll be anxiously following everything you do this year. Congratulations again on this great new partnership. And thanks again so much for sharing so much about your story with us. It was a really fun conversation.
Yeah, definitely, and a lot that hasn't been talked about. So thank you, Dylan. This is fun.